Today we're going to talk about espresso, and we're going to do a deep dive into it. We really wanted to do this episode for quite some time now, and we have a fully packed schedule of topics to go through. And it's going to be both a historical aspect to it, but also a deep dive into the technical part of espresso and our journey from the last 15 years in brewing espresso professionally.
Right. No, and you and I are always talking about brewing parameters and brewing coffee, and we especially talk about brewing espresso continuously for 15 more years, and almost 20. The other day I had a great conversation with a super ambitious barista here in Stockholm, and he brewed me an espresso. They're using our coffees at one of the coffee bars in the guest grinder here in Stockholm, and it turned out that they're using quite different sort of brew recipe and even approach compared to how we are. And so I started describing to him, this is our approach. It used to be this way. This is halfway there. And today we're brewing more like this. And he was like, whoa, what? This is super interesting. And it just really like pushed home that we need to share this conversation with everybody, with more people.
Yeah, so this will be for everyone interested in espresso, for everyone who may be thinking of getting interested in espresso, or maybe already know everything about espresso and just want to hear our chit chat about how we did it for the time being. Should we start off with the history?
Yes, let's.
Espresso and our history of espresso. Where do you want to start?
So, let's go back. You and I started brewing seriously, super seriously, 2009, 10, something like that. So, going back to that sort of era, one did not have any distribution tools. There were no scales involved, neither for dosing or for brewing. So it's very much based on the he's done it or she has done this 10,000 times, so she is mastering the art of brewing espresso. And so it really was about dosing and manually distribution, getting everything the same as it always was, but also the brewing itself. You would stand there and visually determine, am I turning off now or now or now?
Yeah, it was a big visual thing.
Yeah. And so what we were looking for was in the beginning of the shot, it was darker, richer, and then it would get a little bit thinner, and then we were looking for when it blonded. Whatever we called it. And it was this particular hue of whatever now kind of thing. Then we would stand there perfect. Yeah.
Because that was industry standard.
Yeah.
That was
how only we did it,
everyone did it.
Yeah. And I think it was 2011, 12, somewhere around there, that I think the first person I saw brewing espresso onto a scale, but also for the dosing, was James Hoffman. I'm sure he didn't come up with it. Other smart people were doing it for consistency and sort of quality control. But so we started brewing on scale around that time, and sort of measuring what our recipes were when we would do the old school style. So we were dosing around 19 grams, and the yield was around 32 to 34 grams at the time. That's when it blonded, and we would turn it off. So that's going back.
I remember back then realizing, because we looked, when you brewed espresso back in the day, usually coffees were slightly more developed and darker roasted. So you got a lot more crema. And then when we started Drop Coffee and started the Nordic revolution, whatever you want to call it, Scandinavian roast philosophy, crema slowly took a step back. But when we started measuring espresso, I remember realizing like it's so light, the weight of the crema, because you can look on like an Italian espresso and be like, oh my God, this must be a heavy dose because it's so much crema, but the weight of the espresso is still low. So now when there's like, now you don't even think of it in terms of volume, you just look at the weight of the coffee. And that was a big eye-opener to realize the crema isn't that heavy as it looks.
Right. That's pretty
because if you do if you do espresso without crema, it's pure liquid and the most heavy a coffee can get in terms of grams. So I competed in 2013, I think, same year as Matt Perger did his coffee revolution in Australia and Melbourne, and he kind of took it one step too far fast with these kind of EK long shot brew filter style. But he did really start something off with the EK grinder shots that we use until up on today, because it's an amazing coffee grinder. And it kind of really took off from there. And since,
No, I mean, I remember, so you competed at the World Championship. Same year, Matt Perger introduced the EK43. And I remember us coming back to Stockholm, like, we need to try this. And you could not buy an EK43 at the time. So we had to get one, nobody in Sweden could sell it, but like we got one straight from Alkönig in Germany. They made like an exception, and I also went down to Copenhagen so Matt and his coach Ben, after the World Championship, they like did a world tour. You want to try EK43 brewing, and they were hosted by Coffee Collective. I went down there, and I remember coming back to Drop Coffee and saying that like brewing an espresso but using the EK43 as the grinder, and then drinking the coffee, it was like cupping espresso, because all the taste notes became so clear. And I mean, obviously we're comparing, because the so-called traditional espresso grinder at the time was not as well developed or good as today's espresso grinders are. So the difference is a little bit less, but it was still like so revolutionary. The other thing that we started doing at that time, attributing this to Matt Perger, is starting to use the refractometer. And so many things were changing. I would also say, like going back to how we used to brew 15 years ago, is you and I were very heavily invested in competitions, and many of our colleagues at Drop Coffee and other sort of companies here in Sweden were very heavily invested. And so on the score sheet at the time, the body, the tactile was ×4. And so we were looking for like a heavier mouthfeel. So we would go down in yield in order to get a higher tactile score. And so for a while there, we were brewing like 19 grams in, 28 out, which for today, how we're thinking about espresso makes no sense at all, but I think it was very much like a consequence of how the score sheet was formulated. So
I remember the head judge, Sonja, in my debriefing in the Worlds, I got low scores on the espresso and very high on cappuccinos, and the signature beverage was almost 6s. But I missed the semifinals by a few points, and I sat down and spoke to her and said, I got like 2.5s on espresso. And she said, Oscar, this is a remarkably good espresso. But the problem is you're ahead of the score sheet. There's no way for the judges to evaluate this next step in acidity and liveliness and lightness. Because there's still things in the score sheet that reflects more dark body, classical espresso notes. Maybe if I read the rules better and prepare the judges on this, like you should move your perception of how this espresso should align to the score sheet. But yeah, and I know years or year after something, they started slowly changing the protocols, and now you for a few years, I know the baristas were like, and myself as well, you can prepare judges for kind of where on the scale they should judge it. But it was early days, and we learned a lot from that. So
I remember also sort of in terms of perception and judging. So I went down, and I can't remember what year it was. It was very likely like 2016 or 17. I went down to Germany to judge the German Barista Championships and also latte art. One funny thing was that all the competitors spoke German, so it was very hard to follow along for me. But I think it was Gloria was the head judge, and she took us over to, do you remember John Gordon?
Yeah.
So John Gordon, multiple barista champion, amazing thinker. He was in a booth, and Gloria said like, okay, John, serve the judges one under-extracted, balanced, and over-extracted espresso, please. And so he did like, I don't remember exactly, but something like 20 in, 30 out, under extracted. 20 in, 45 out, spot on. 20 in, 65 out, over extracted. And like everything became so clear.
Yeah.
I then went on to judge for the rest of the couple of days, and like I knew exactly, okay, this is where Gloria is meaning us for us to sort of like evaluate things with. It was amazing.
Cool. Should we leave the history part?
Yes.
I think we realized when we did the planning for this episode that every single line of this planning could be an episode itself. But it doesn't matter. We have time today, and we're also gonna do some shooting at the espresso machine. Maybe we can like cut in some video materials, but otherwise.
But when we started, you asked like, should we have any props? And no, not really. But like we spoke about the EK43. That could be a prop, and that really has been like for us, you and me, one of the big changes in terms of like how to approach espresso brewing. The other one is the refractometer, to be able to measure the and obviously the scale, the yield, the extraction yield, and so on.
Yeah.
Just like,
and if anyone have questions or don't follow along on the name dropping that we're gonna do now, just hit us a message or in the comments below on YouTube, and we can send some links or some photos and stuff. But as I said, we're also gonna do some video materials of brewing espresso, and maybe we can cut some parts into this video to show the distribution tool or whatever. So the first topic is, to start with, is the coffee.
Yes.
Can you do espresso of all coffees? Yeah.
And we do,
because it's a question we get a lot. Like,
we do
can I do, or is this like an espresso coffee?
Right. Right. No, and so I actually, in many emails I do write that you and I particularly, obviously we cup everything, we brew everything, but you and I also, a little bit more than the rest of the team, we brew everything as espresso because that's what we do. And so we'll use like any coffee, any type of roast profile, and we'll throw it in the grinder. Obviously, if you have an espresso grinder, there's a little bit more work in terms of like purging the grinder and so on. But if you use an EK43 or another single dose grinder, then it's no problem at all. But obviously with different coffees, you're going to get different results. You just this morning told me about brewing a coffee, like a really high quality coffee, but a darker roast profile or deeper, more developed. And what did you think of that?
It was very interesting. It was we actually have, to be a little bit more transparent, we have a client that that bought the last kilo, I think, of the Hacienda La Esmeralda Buenos Aires lots, and they wanted it to be a slightly more developed profile, and we were like, "Whoa, okay." But we have let's try it, and it's been resting now for like 10 days, and it was an amazing experience. If you just can, in the end, think away of the small, maybe more darkish notes that we are learned to not like, but it was a super sweet experience, and the acidity of these like super high quality coffees are still like sparkling and so nice.
Right.
And what kind of a small eye opener for me as well, going into competition seasons and stuff. Not that we're gonna like start doing dark roast, but it was a very, very interesting to take like the world's most exclusive and expensive coffee and like push it
and roast it for espresso.
Yeah, because it has so much resistance, and like the bean itself is so hard and big, and you can really push it, and you did when when we did the experimental roast.
And I want to contextualize, because it sounds like we're like swearing in church or like breaking all the rules, but so going back to we source and roast a lot for different competitors, and we always roast for the score sheet. So if people are competing in Brewers Cup or Coffee and Good Spirits or Barista, for example, for Barista, we will have one roast profile. For the espresso, we will very often have a different roast profile for the milk beverage and a third profile for the signature beverage, depending on what signature. So us roasting a kilo or two, a bit darker for this purpose is not unusual or strange.
But usually we've been a little bit back and forth and evolved with the coffees. I think we are on a spot now where I think develop the coffees in a super good way, keeping all the best aspects of the cup. And we realize they work perfectly as a sparkling filter or a modern espresso. So you can call it whatever you like, but at the moment we have one roast profile for our like everyday coffees. But if clients or wholesale partners want something different, and I would say when you speak about this, the roast philosophy, you always think of like, let's go darker. But most of our clients say, we're going to serve this as filter and espresso, or only espresso, but please keep the filter profile for the espresso, because we are like a modern, new, trending cafe. But we listen to our partners. We have our ideas, of course, and philosophies. And
one of the things, we're in the showroom now, one of the things with having the showroom is that we can roast and brew and rest the coffees just the way we like. So for all of those people who don't live in Stockholm, make the journey, come over here and have a coffee according to how we want it. But we always listen to our wholesale partners. And I remember actually like being a little bit surprised how many people wanted us to send them the filter profile for their espresso. So having said that, how do we brew what's the like numbers? How do we brew the espresso here at the showroom?
Now you're getting ahead of time.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. So
no, we are still in the kind of history build up.
Yeah. So coffee. Yeah.
Yes. Let's talk quickly about the machine.
Yes.
And also the grinder.
Right.
Because it's two things that people ask us every time they're here, especially now when we have an espresso machine that costs $25,000 approximately. It's a 2-group machine from a company called Kees van der Westen, and we don't have time to go into the machine itself, why it's so amazing. But still, there's like taking consideration buying an espresso machine or having an espresso machine. Of course, you need the pressure, what's like extracts the coffee from the coffee, and it needs to be like espresso machines is all about consistency.
Right.
That's the first thing.
So like thermal stability.
Yeah.
No fluctuations, for example.
No.
Yeah.
But then on good espresso machines, you can play around with the pressure during the brew process. But that's like step 2 or 3 or 4.
Right.
But many people is like, oh, now, my wife said, oh, I have 2 friends at work and they finally decided to buy an espresso machine. And then she realized, but you maybe don't even need to answer, because they were like, we have been like saving some money and we're going to invest in this espresso machine. And I know they're like 1/5 of the way to get into like a solid espresso machine. It's very hard to coach them then.
Yes.
Because if you pay less for an espresso machine, you get less stability, you get the correct pressure.
Right.
But the thing is, like with cheaper espresso machines, they usually work for like 1 to 2 shots.
Right.
But then if you pay more, then you can do 100.
Right.
And that also comes into the stability part of it. Like, can you do multiple cappuccinos in a row, or can you only do one?
Yeah.
So usually on cheaper espresso machines, you have the pressure, you have the steam pressure, and you have the temperature, which is kind of the third part.
Yeah.
But only for a limited time.
Yeah.
But usually that's enough.
That's enough.
Yeah.
So you make 1 cappuccino.
Yes.
But also, I mean, it's you're spot on with your description that your wife's colleagues might be 1/5 of the way of being able to invest into what you would consider.
They usually end up there.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they forget the grinder.
Yeah.
So espresso is, and also talking about like what coffee can you use, and you can use any coffee. Like going into espresso, you need to do it. I brew espresso every morning. If an espresso doesn't get perfect, I don't redo it. I just redo it the next morning.
Day. Yeah.
Because you do like 20 grams of coffee, and if you buy like an expensive coffee and you constantly gonna redo it, you're gonna waste a lot of coffee. Yeah. So
and if you would sometimes you work from home, and then you'll do one in the morning, and then you'll do one in the afternoon or something.
Yeah. But then you have so people ask about the pressure. Right. It's usually around like 9 bars to start with.
Yeah.
But when you dig deeper into this, you can like have different profiles and different pressure profiles. And then you have the temperature.
Right.
So going into those two, like the base question, what should the bar be? And what temperature do we brew espresso on? Barbie. Sounds like a...
Yeah. So we're talking about 9 bars usually. We're usually talking in terms of temperature in Celsius between 92 and 96 degrees. Yeah. And they talk about time. How long should the contact time be? We're often talking about between 20 to 28 seconds-ish, something like that. But I wanted to add also, because some people listening to this are coffee professionals. They have like a very fancy machine of all sorts, but a lot of people who are listening to this are home enthusiasts. And so you can buy something for your home for $1,000, but you can also buy something for your home for $20,000. And so, and both you and I have had all sorts of various really nice machines. And so on some home machines, you can also change the pressure during the shot. Yep. You can very often change the temperature. Depending on, what kind of coffee you have, you might want to change the temperature. And obviously we change the contact time through grinding coarser or finer. Yep.
So one thing that going back to and then they forget the grinder, is that you should almost put the same amount on the machine as on the grinder. Because people usually end up buying a coffee machine for like between $1,000 to $1,500 or euros. And then they're like, oh, we should have a grinder as well. And then put like 200 euros into a cheap espresso grinder. Yeah. And then they blame the espresso machine.
Right.
But if you turn it around, like if you buy a cheap espresso machine and put like a 3,000 euro grinder, you will have very good results. Yeah. Because the espresso machine is usually just made for like pushing out hot water with a kind of stable brew pressure. So yeah, if you think consideration are in like, I'm gonna become an espresso person at home, put €1 into the machine and €1 into the grinder, because you will have very, very good results.
And there's a lot of content online about grinders and all the options. And I mean, again, you and I have been using both at work and at home espresso grinders or single dose grinders.
And at the moment, if anyone asks, we have the EK43S, the low version with custom espresso burrs that we can do single dose espresso on. We have the new Rev Zero, which is a new cool grinder that have very, very or minimal retention of how much coffee it's stuck in the between the beans and what's come out in the chute. We also work with the new Sculptor grinders. That I have it now. We have one here and one using at home, and it's an amazing grinder for the price point. Because you need to take that in consideration. So I think if you're gonna put like something into an espresso machine, that is a grinder to really consider, because you have a very, very good price point, and it's a small footprint, and you can do like change stuff. And I've heard there's like a bunch of different burrs that you can simply add.
But for many years, when people asked both you and me, like, what should I get in terms of grinder, our go-to answer has been Malkönig EK43.
And also their Mythos. No, it's not the same company. But that's also really solid. Many people use it. But if you need advice on grinders, just send us a message. We know kind of everyone, and we have been using all grinders.
We should not forget the Weber workshops.
No, of course.
Grinder array. Amazing.
There's a lot of good grinders and a lot of good espresso machines. But the problem is, the more you put in, the better it gets. There's sadly no shortcuts. There's no like one espresso machine that just dominates everything. Like the more you put in, the better it gets. They're gonna wrap up the history part.
So according to our schedule or outline, where are we at?
We are now on the question of that we also get a lot, freshness. How long should the coffee rest? And I usually answer short and say, if you plan to compete in the Worlds, you should let your coffee rest between 16 to 25 days. So usually baristas that compete on our coffee wait 20 days after roast. It usually ends up there, plus minus. We changed our roaster 2 years ago from a traditional hot drum roaster, the Diddish, to the Loring. And that also extended the resting time a bit, because hot air roasters usually peak their coffees around 20 days instead of traditional was like 14 after roast. So you get like another week, but that's a geeky thing. So the short answer is, let your coffee rest for around 3 weeks. It's usually very good. Like, you should wait at least a week, but that's the thing. When we roast coffee, usually on order or on demand, we ship it globally. Usually takes like 3 to 6 or 10 days. Then when it comes, you can just let it be for a few days, and then you're ready to go. Then it's a very nice time frame from 2.5 weeks to kind of 5 weeks, where you kind of can go through the coffee, try it like every second day, develop with the time that is. So but usually try to wait at least 2.5 to 3 weeks after.
I always find it very hard to wait. I get the coffee, whether it's from here or from other places, and I'm like, I want to taste it now. But then obviously I will keep tasting it over the next coming weeks. And so I will experience like, oh, it's getting better. And then sometimes we have coffee that's been laying around for 3 months, and then we can taste like, oh, maybe it's like a lost. I remember we bought some coffees from some other roasters, and like, oh, super interesting to taste that coffee like after 4 weeks, after 12 weeks, after 20 weeks. See how intensity drops off.
And one thing that kind of drops off is another topic here, like the crema and the visual part of.
Yes.
Because we grew up on the visual aspect of espresso, and it really still sticks with me.
Yeah.
I use everything possible to get the best possible espresso, but I also look at the espresso coming out from the spouts, and it's not always aligning of when it looks good and tastes good.
Right.
But damn, I love when it looks good.
Yeah.
It's just
no, and again, going back to the beginning of you and me competing, a lot of the score sheet was on the visuals and like what the crema looked like. If you had any like inconsistencies in the color of the crema, then you would get points deducted.
yes.
So we were like fanatically looking for that, and even going a year ahead or a year or two even before that, you were looking for tiger stripes, which was very, very much in direct correlation to the level of roast.
Yeah.
And so at drop, you and I were roasting very lightly, so it was impossible to get tiger stripes. Yeah.
I think we are in a good spot now where the espresso looks good and tastes good.
Yeah.
Which is best of both worlds. Yeah. So going on, we're going to talk about dosing.
Right.
How do we do dose espresso today?
Right. And so so today we are dosing 19, between 19 and 20, I would say. And again, 10 years ago, when we started using scales, we would use a scale for every shot.
Yeah.
But now grinders are more consistent, both in terms of how much they give you, whether it's time-based or if there's a built-in scale in the grinder. So today we will use the scale to sort of like set up the recipe and then trust the equipment.
Trust equipment.
But so we're dosing 19 grams, and we're using the scale. We have multiple scales.
Yeah. And when you say 19 grams, it's the amount of coffee
into the portafilter.
Into the portafilter.
Yeah.
That's also the first part of the recipe.
Yes.
That we say 19, then we mean the amount of coffee going into the portafilter.
Right. Yes.
And then the next step is Distribution.
Yes.
What is distribution?
So again, I'm noticing how you and I are referring to the competition a lot. So according to the score sheet, the technical part of the score sheet, you want to be like flawless, but also consistent. And so whether I was competing or I was helping others compete, I would help to drill in like you do the exact same thing every time. So part of the grooming was another word of like distribution. So the grinder would dose, and then you would tap to settle the grounds. Tap, 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 or tap, tap. If you did 2 or 3, always do the same thing. So that settles the grounds. And then going back to 2010, a lot of people would use the stock fleth method of distribution. But today, and from 2015, we've been using different versions of distribution tools, whether it was the OCD, which I think they call something else today, or 3 or 4 years ago, Matt and Jeremy came up with this from Barista Hustle, and this is for us the like go-to tool. So every shot, whether it's for a milk beverage or an espresso, whether it's here at the coffee bar or for a world championship final, we always use this. And it distributes the ground coffee in the portafilter perfectly every time.
Because going back to, if you don't distribute well, water is an easy thing with pressure. It just takes the easiest way, the route through the espresso puck. And if you have a really bad distribution and there's a big hole in one part of the puck, the water will just flow through there and out in your espresso cup, and you will get an uneven and bad extraction. But if you can distribute all the coffee perfectly, the water will go through more evenly, and you will get a better result. But the most important thing is that you over time will get a more even result. That's why you should distribute coffee well, because you get the same results every time. Then you can go back to the coffee and the machine and the roast philosophy and everything. But if you distribute good, both in terms of dosing with scales and then distribution, you just get a more even result. Because if you get an even result, maybe you blame the coffee.
Right.
Like, oh, it's an uneven coffee, or my machine is broken because the pressure is uneven. But usually it comes down to bad distribution. So it's a quick fix.
Error.
Human error. So it eliminates that.
After this, you have the tamping.
Yes.
Of course, today here at the coffee bar and on the competition stage, we use an automatic tamper that gives me exactly the same 15 kilo pressure every time. But you and I, obviously, for 15 years, tamped manually. And I remember sitting at home with my kids watching whatever TV, and I would bring out the bathroom scale, and I would sit while they were watching cartoons, and I would tamp, 500 times and make sure that I was tamping 15 kilos every time. So I was consistent in the pressure.
Another thing that you can control if you don't have an automatic tamper is how straight you tamp.
Right.
So if you hold the portafilter and you have it in, you can kind of see if it's aligned or straight. Same thing if it's not aligned and like this, water will take the easy part because it's less coffee here than here. So if you're doing manual tamping on stage in a competition, judges will be like, really look at how even you tamp, even more than pressure, because pressure is hard to see. Another thing with tampers is that they usually are 58 millimeters, but like this tamper has expanded slightly more, because portafilters are usually not exactly 58. They're like 58.6. So many tampers now have different plates, so they can like really fit your portafilter basket. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the basket, because it's also a big game changer when it happened. Baskets was back in the day just baskets, but then like precision made laser cut baskets came to the market, changed the game a lot, because there was so much fluctuation and bad things happening in the port.
You would have a 2 or a 3 group machine, and the one group would be like, oh, everything tastes great over here. Why am I getting such a different result? And you would look at the baskets, and they were like totally different. And that's.
But usually people throw the machine out and buy a new one.
Right.
But then there was like, because then you also have the size of the basket. Like ranging from like 14 grams up to 23 grams. That's the amount of coffee you can actually fit into the basket. So that's another thing that you as a owner of an espresso machine maybe needs to take in consideration. And it's also a very fun thing to experiment with.
And the first company that came out with precision cut baskets were VST, and everybody bought them. Obviously, over the last 10 years, many other companies are doing wonderful baskets. But whether you're a home aficionado or running a coffee bar, baskets is like super important. And it is, going back to what you spoke about, like pay as much for the grinder as you do for a machine. Baskets is sort of a boring thing to spend thousands or hundreds of dollars on, but it is really very important.
So going through what we end up calling the espresso recipe, or comes in what we also talk about, brew ratio. So time and weight. What's most important?
Weight by far. And so going back to our
10 years ago. There was no one talking about weight.
No.
And only time. You're like, I ruined my espresso because it ran for 22 seconds.
Right.
But if you don't have any coffee in the portafilter, 22 seconds is like a liter of water.
Right.
And if you have super fine grind coffee, no water comes through, 22 seconds is zero coffee.
No, and you're absolutely right. So back in like 2010 to 2011, 12, people would talk about the recipe being 25 seconds.
Yes.
And then, so you fill this thing with coffee and then you brew it for 25 seconds.
That was
and
the
then
recipe.
It should blonde.
Yeah.
Makes no sense. Yeah. And so, but today we're talking about using 19 grams of coffee, and you and I will allow the coffee to run between 22-ish or 20 all the way up to 26, 28, maybe even 30 seconds. But we're looking for coffee out, and again, using a scale to measure how much liquid we're getting in the cup or in the cups. We're often looking for 50 grams or more.
And that turns into a brew ratio.
Yes.
So you have, to make it easy, if you have 20 grams in the basket and you bring out 40 grams, and when we talk about bringing out, it's like you put the scale on the tray of the espresso machine, you have 1 or 2 cups, and it's the total amount coming out in those cups, as usually 2 single espressos, or if you have 1 cup, double espresso. So if you have 20 grams in and 40 grams out, that's a ratio of 1 to 2.
Right.
But nowadays, mostly when you calibrate espresso, how we brew it here, we have 19 grams in and between 48 to 50 plus grams out, ranging from let's say 48 to 55 or something. So you get a higher brew ratio of 1, which is 19, and whatever 52 is maybe 2.3 or something.
Yeah, so it's 2.7.
2.7, yeah.
Which is, again, super geeky.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. And people ask, and I say, that's this. I will either answer with a 2.7 brew ratio, or I will say 19 in, 52 out. And what about time? And I say, go between 20 to 26 seconds, see what you like, kind of thing. So then the question is but that's weird. What is this all based on? Is this based on Oscar's personal opinion? And I say no, it's based on how much coffee we are extracting, because it all goes back. You've been very sort of distinct about talking about even extraction. Why are we making sure that the coffee bed is perfectly distributed? Why are we tamping straight and so on? We want the water to run through whole bed of coffee to extract as much as possible, evenly and consistently. And the idea is to every time extract the same amount. And so when we are extracting, some people are looking at our door. So when we are extracting in this way, we are always reaching a 21, 22% extraction yield. That means that we are using a 19 gram dose, 20-ish something second contact time, 52 grams out. We are extracting evenly all the coffee to the level where it tastes really, really balanced and sweet.
And this is, now
we got pretty geeky.
Yeah. And the refractometer is something that's a big divider of when people are I know a lot, but I don't want to know more.
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's super efficient for us to have it and for customers to have it. And another thing that we can look into here is water.
Yes.
And reading water, because it's something that's way overlooked and people don't even care about it.
Right.
They just I'm going to put a lot of money into the espresso machine and grinder and the coffee, and then they forget about what's 97% of whatever. Of the coffee.
Right.
The water.
Yeah.
So last 2 or 3 years now, people building their own water with companies that are specializing in this. We have usually have a water filter for the espresso machine to bring away the calcium, because that usually can
corrode
the machine and stuff. So it's something to think of. But now you can have these water systems also plugged into the machine, so you can calibrate the water for the machine. What you need to take in consideration is that there's a water tank in the machine, and if you're going to change anything, you really need to go through a lot of water.
Yeah.
Because you can't just like look at this app and be like, I'm going to change the water recipe like you could do on a hand brew or filter coffee.
Right.
But on the espresso machine, you really need to make sure to empty the tank.
Yeah.
And that's what just make it harder. But if you want, you can have like the filter for calcium and stuff, but then also build your own water for espresso.
No, and like, so we're here in Stockholm, and the tap water is really fantastic. Yes. It's completely potable or drinkable, like you just. But in many parts of the world, tap water is completely not drinkable, and so obviously you absolutely will need some sort of water filtration system, whether you are in Stockholm or anywhere else in the world, for the sake of the machine. But in many parts of the world, like, everything is going to taste terrible if you would use tap water. So you need to filter the water.
Yeah.
But when we pulled up this mineral measuring pen, it's to measure like how much minerals, what's the percentage of minerals in the water. Yep. And so, again, going back to my experience at the Coffee Collective 10, 15 years ago, they were using, at the time, just to illustrate, 30 ppm minerals in the water that they were using for filter coffee, and 120 to 130 ppms of minerals in the water that they were using for espresso. Yeah. So very like amazing intentionality and consistency, and
And there's maybe a right or wrong here, but another thing is like that we speak a lot about is consistency. Like if you have a water that fluctuates, or you build your own water, but you don't really know what you put into the machine, and then you change the recipe before the first water is not even run through, you're like way off.
Yeah,
and
too many variables,
and you're just guessing. And that's a big thing if we're just gonna kind of wrap this up and take it back to the history. What we really asked for in the beginning, I remember being at Nordic Barista Cup on Iceland. We had people from Markönig there, and we as young baristas really asked for consistency.
Right.
Like, how can we get the grinders to be more consistent? Espresso machines are very consistent when it comes to like heat, pressure, and everything. But the grinders, and I know it's very hard, of course, because you're grinding something that could be big or small or hard or light roasted or dark roasted. Like the coffee bean itself is a living material, and when you crush it, it doesn't crush evenly. And people starting using this sifting tool, sieving tools to like even out. So you only have like same size of grind particles. And you can also see these charts. Like the more you pay for a grinder, usually you get a more even ground coffee result. You have less what's called fines, that small powder-like forms, and boulders, which are the big ones. So the less of those, the more even the result is.
Right.
And that's what we look for in espresso, with everything we talked about here, with like why you pay 20,000 euros for an espresso machine and 6,000 euros for a grinder. You pay for consistency. But if you're a happy home brewer, maybe it doesn't really matter that much.
Right.
You're on a journey, you buy different coffees every week. You kind of find your way to make a good espresso. But for us, if you're gonna brew like 5 or 1 or 10 or 50 coffees, you need to be consistent, because otherwise people will come back for a result that we can't replicate.
And I mean, so, and here it's important to talk. So there's like a lot of talk and focus on the equipment when it comes to espresso. When it comes to filter coffee, you can have a world-class setup with relatively little money.
Yes.
You can have a really amazing hand grinder. You can have some pour-over equipment, which is insanely inexpensive, really. And you can put all your money on amazing coffee.
Yeah.
When it comes to espresso, there's like more of an investment because the machine and the grinder are more important.
But if you go down that route, that's an amazing journey.
Yes.
And in the end, whatever interest you have, it's not that much money in the end of the day. Just if you can't afford it now, I would recommend wait a year and have like a solid savings plan. Because if you go into espresso, many people go into espresso and they go into low, and then the interest raises and they have to start over again.
Right.
So the more you put into the espresso machine and the grinder, the longer you will.
And I think many people
like
take
it.
the route, which is similar to what I did, is like, oh, I bought that mid-range and then was like, but I want more stability, more, better. And so I sold my machine secondhand, bought something else.
Yeah.
Sort of like traded up over a few years.
Which is usually a good way to go. But really think of it like, do I need an espresso machine now? Or can I just wait half a year and save some more and get a better machine? Because you usually end up like modding your machine and trying to get the results you know other have. And in the end, it's more expensive than just buying the better machine because you have a longer lifespan and more stability. So
I would like to also sort of just again go back to our current brew recipe, which is like the brew recipe, which has been our recipe for a long time now. Previously, our brew's recipe would change, like the whole world of coffee would change, and so, but this sort of like recipe, we've been brewing this similar way in a few years, but you still have a lot of baristas and companies out there who are brewing with a different recipe, like a more traditional or old school, like 20 grams in, 40 grams out. What do you think what makes it taste better with our brew recipe?
I think you're of course, we're not the recipe to rule them all, because there's people doing like all sorts of crazy stuff on both ends.
Yeah.
Low pressure, low temperature, long shots, and very short things that also can taste good. But I think this is a super solid recipe that's been around and developed for at least 10 years now. It's very common in the world to see it on competitions. So many other people can approve that this recipe is good. And another thing an aspect of this is that we don't change the recipe that much, is that we get the question, how do we brew your coffee as espresso, and what setting should I have on my grinder? And I don't know how sharp your grind burrs are and what grinder you have and everything. But if you just do as we tell you to do, and then we can just go back to the time. Like what's the end time? When you hit the numbers? 1950, let's say. It was on 15 seconds. So just adjust your grinder to get in the range of 22 to 26 seconds. And then, of course, you're free to experiment. But I think many companies are experimenting too much.
Right.
They change recipe for every single coffee. They change like burrs and speeds and water and everything. And it just gets too complicated. Same with the double bloom recipe that we're going to do another episode about, like our go-to V60 or hand brew recipe. This checks so many boxes, and we can focus on the coffee instead of like experimenting with all sorts of stuff. Now we're lucky enough to have like world-class equipment, so we can put that aside.
Right.
And
but world-class equipment to meet our world-class coffee.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
That we are able to
because people come here and they expect a lot, and we want to give them everything. So
what I was going to say in terms of like why our brew recipe is, I like how you said a brew recipe to rule them all. So this is not just our brew recipe. This is the recipe that very many of the baristas that we work with and other people work with use for the World Barista Championship finals. This is like an amazing recipe. And it goes also back to our approach to roasting. Because if we would roast, so if we're looking for a certain level of extraction in order to taste perfectly balanced sweetness, beautiful singing acidity, we're going to need to extract to a certain level.
Yeah.
If we have a darker roast or deeper roasted coffee, then that coffee is more soluble. So you don't need to pour as much water in through that coffee bed in order to reach the same level of extraction. At the same time, if you have a much lighter roast, you need to put even more water through that bed of coffee in order to reach the same level of extraction. That was super geeky, I know, but I think a lot of you out there are following along. And so that's why to get to get on the score sheet the maximum amount of points, then 19 grams in 22 to 26 seconds, 50 to 54 grams out.
Perfect. Let's end with that. No, we're going to wrap this up, I think. It was a good hour.
Yeah.
I hope everyone learned something. We can do deeper dives into certain parts of this episode if you want. Especially, I think, what you ended with and also came in about the extraction. I think a lot of people don't understand at all.
Right.
So maybe we can do an episode with charts more in-depth about like the extraction and the philosophy around it, and also going back to the history of why Matt Perger did it with the EK43.
Right.
It's all about the extraction.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up, please follow us on YouTube, share, and subscribe, because it helps a lot to grow this channel. We see more and more people coming in now. Maybe after we change from this regular every week podcast thing to a more approach to certain topics, which I like a lot, because it's easier for us to have episodes that are more lived longer.
Yeah, right.
So follow us. This is also coming up on Instagram as short reels. And
if you have any questions, in the last reel you did, people asked about like, what if I wanted to brew more coffee or something? And we had a great conversation.
Yes. So hit us up. Until next time.